Well, welcome. I'm your host, Cindy Watson, and today I can't wait to introduce you to Dr. Cynthia Colón. Welcome, Cynthia. It's so great to have you here.
Well, hello, Cindy, and thank you for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking about negotiables in the college admission process, what you control and what you don't. So we've never tackled this issue before, and I know a lot of people struggle, so really looking forward to the conversation. That market is getting more and more competitive. It's you hear crazy stories. And for those in the audience who don't know, Dr. Cynthia Colón, she's the author of Be Committed, Get Admitted, which I love that title. She's the founder of College Essay Bootcamp and the host of Destination YOUniversity podcast. She's an alumni of USC, Columbia University, and UCLA. And she is on a mission to close the education gap by first closing the information gap. And I personally love that. So why don't we jump right in then, Cynthia? I know, one of the key elements for me of the art of feminine negotiation is encouraging people, and frankly, women in particular, who tend to be less likely to do it, to ask for what they want. And I know you credit your immigrant mother for having the courage to ask for help, and that changed the trajectory of your life. So I'd love if you could tell us about that. That really piqued my interest.
Yes, my mom is my shero, and I come from, humble background, but I grew up in Bellflower, California. Neither of my parents had gone to college, but my mom was just like sort of not having it. Like that was not going to be the path for her daughter. She didn't get encouraged to go to college herself. Yeah. And so she used the word when instead of if in our vocabulary at home. She would always say, when you go to college, when you get an A, when you make the team, those kinds of things. Nice. And so my senior year, in all honesty, my parents were going through divorce, and it was a struggle, so she was now a single parent mom. And so I remember saying to her one day, I said, it's fine. I think I'll just go to the local college. And she knew my dream school was USC. And she was like, oh no, that's not happening. So she pulled out a business card of someone she had met at a dinner. She worked at a bank, and drove us up the 110 freeway in the brown Oldsmobile. And there we went to meet with Mr. Vargas. And my mom always just had that, I don't know, but I can find out. I can figure it out. I can negotiate my way through there, or she could just figure it out. So there we were sitting in his office, and he shared with her how to apply for financial aid. And he shared with me where to get an application and sort of how to navigate through the process. Yeah. And several months later, I was admitted.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh my God, you're breaking my heart here, because my dad sadly died way too young, like 30 years ago. And my background sounds same as yours. I grew up in a low rental sort of complex in what was known as a pretty tough neighborhood. Nobody on either side of the extended family had gone to university. And I had totally forgotten until you just said that. I remember my dad bringing some guy who was a student at the factory he worked in home one night for dinner. And sure enough, he was there pumping him for information for me about you, because it was the only person my dad knew who'd ever gone to university. So what a beautiful story. But I still felt like I was having to navigate the process on a prayer and a wing. So what do you remember about your own college journey? How'd you get started helping families navigate their college admission process?
Well, once I got to USC, which was, again, that was my dream school. And I like to say out loud, because University of Southern California is one of the top schools to get into now, but then it was known as a safety school. And so I always say, whatever your dream college is, that's your dream college. So to me, when I opened the envelope, it felt like I was getting into Harvard. So it's different for everybody. So anyway, I went on to graduate school at Teachers College at Columbia. And that's where I sort of started to really understand private colleges, sort of the elite. I worked at Barnard College as an intern while I was at Columbia. And then my first job was at Vassar College. And when I worked at Vassar in the admission office and traveled the country, I was in charge of like California, Texas, Florida, different parts of the country. They would send me to visit high schools. By and large, they were private schools, not all, but by and large. And that's where I really saw the education gap. Like when I saw sort of the resources, I would walk into these, first of all, many of them had like a guard gate, and you'd have to sort of, get a pass to like enter the school, and brick buildings, columns. And I was like, I didn't know that schools like that existed. I was like, did I make a wrong turn? Is this a college? So I was just sort of, my eyes just wide open. And so I would sit on the beaches of Miami or on the Riverwalk in San Antonio at night, becoming sort of an anthropologist and a sociologist of the process. And I would take notes in my journal thinking, gosh, someone like me, when I was in high school, needs to know, what these private school students probably take for granted. I mean, no judgment. If that's your world, God bless you, but I just believe that there is an information gap, and I just wanted to get the information out to more people.
Oh, and I love that. I mean, every way, it's been a huge sort of mission of mine from a very young age. I remember thinking, everybody should have access to education. Like this, should not be something that is only for the privileged. Otherwise, that class break just gets wider and wider and wider. The only way we're going to equalize that is by getting that access to education. Now, what's the biggest mistake that parents and high school students make on the journey? Because gosh, you just hear some horror stories out there these days.
I know. So, you mentioned, earlier that there's so many more students applying. Interestingly enough, there are fewer students. The number of students graduating from high school is shrinking, right? The population is shrinking of that age gap. And it sort of corresponds with 2008, the crash of 2008, families started having fewer students. But because of test optional and a number of other things, the number of applications continues to rise. So the same number of students or fewer are applying to more schools.
Got it.
Math makes sense.
Yeah.
So first thing is, by and large, the average acceptance rate is 65%. So most students are going to get admitted. Those students who are applying to what we call top 100 schools that admit under 30%, or even schools that admit under 50%, I think there are two mistakes. So the student mistake is hubris. Yeah. Just thinking that they can conquer the world and they can do it on their own and not really get even any feedback. And I'm not talking even feedback like from an expert college person like me, but even just like asking the teacher, like a teacher or a family friend or someone to like review your application before you turn it in. This is sort of like applying to like the biggest job of your life to date. And you probably want to get some input. So my overachievers are probably the worst. Like the kids who are like straight A's, like they got everything, handed to them. They're just good at everything. They're probably, and rightly so, they think they can do it on their own. But I always say like, yeah, but how did you become, the best track star? Or how did you become the best leader? Probably you had a coach along the way.
Exactly. Yes, I love that. And let me just before you do the other one, like put a pin in that for our listeners out there, because I think sometimes when it seems like everything comes easy, there's this tendency to just keep sort of forging along, assuming that golden path is going to always lay out in front of you. And I think it's a great lesson in life that, if we're not growing, we're dying, right? We need to constantly be in that growth mode and be humble enough to look for coaches or mentors or, allies and sponsors in the world to help us be the best version of ourselves and to get further along the path. So sorry to jump in, but I think you really hit a strong chord there.
That makes complete sense. And I think students just forget that they've been the best in their high school, which is a very small pool. Yeah. And now they're going to be competing against, all of the best at every school. So the parents' mistake is just because people who are my age-ish who applied to school, college in like late 80s, early 90s, somewhere around there, if they're anything like me, I rolled out of bed, took the SAT one time and applied to like 3 or 4 schools. And I think I got into all of them, or I think I can remember, but that's all it took. So I didn't think about applying to college until October or November of my senior year, literally. Yeah. And you can't do that anymore. So I think just parents, again, sort of understanding earlier in the process that, the college admission journey really begins freshman year. And if parents are just not mindful of that because that wasn't their experience. Yeah. So, and educating more and more families along the way, just so that they start earlier.
Okay. Now, there's some things in life we just can't control, right? But I love that you are, sort of a big proponent of focusing on those things that you do control. So share with us, what are, say the top 3 elements of the college admission process that you do have some control over for our listeners?
Well, there are 3 decisions in the college admission process: where you apply, where you're admitted, and where you attend. And so we remind students and families, you have 2/3 control over the whole process. Mm-hmm. You have complete control over where you apply and where you ultimately choose as your home.
Yeah.
So that's two big things. Now, in order to have a successful process, you really have to take the time to hone that list of colleges. So I say use the 30-40-30 rule, apply to no more than 30% of your list should be sort of those reach and what I call realistic reaches.
Okay.
And 30% of your likelies are what we used to call safety schools.
Okay.
And then bulk use should be your target or 50-50 schools. So if you've done your job correctly, you're going to have a lot of success. And also, I believe you should have some failures. If you don't have any failures, you didn't shoot high enough, probably.
That's
right?
a great point.
So, you want to stretch, sure. But, again, 30-40-30 rule. And then understanding that you can control some of the components of where you get admitted, because if you really go out of your way to make that story and your application compelling, then you're going to maximize your choices. You're going to help to maximize that middle decision, which is where you get admitted. So you don't have control over where you get admitted, but you can maximize that. And then finally, students don't realize, they have the power. Once April comes and that May 1st deadline is looming, what students are trying to do is get as many colleges to ask for their hand in marriage, essentially. And the more, the better, I guess. And then all you're going to do is choose one. So you have all the cards once April rolls around. So be mindful of that you have a lot of control.
Nice. I love the positive spin on this. And a couple of things really resonated with me there. And one is that when you said, like, you should be having some failures because otherwise you're not, sort of shooting high enough. And I think that is such a valuable lesson for people because we always want what's safe, right? And we tend to not want to stretch outside our comfort zone. And we have that massive fear of rejection and fear of getting no and fear of failure. And this applies for our listeners out there, our viewers, not just for the college application process, but I would say this is fantastic advice you're getting from Cynthia in all of your negotiations and negotiating your life. Set your aspiration levels high, and studies show over and over again, the higher you set your aspiration levels, the more you are going to get, the better outcomes you get. So I think that's fantastic advice. And that flip side about failing, I'm a big fan of I wish if I was able to go over again with my kids, I would do fail-abrations, right? Where we celebrate failures and encourage it instead, because we get so focused on just the positive. And we forget that our greatest learnings almost always come from those things that we try and fail at in life. So I love that advice, Cynthia. I think that's gorgeous.
Well, I have to just tell you that I have this dream, this idea that Martha Stewart or somebody like that will do a show called the Rejection and Reveal Party. All these baby showers, you reveal the gender. And so, when April comes, like celebrating the rejections, but also revealing where you're going to college.
I love that.
Yeah. So when I was at Bachelor, we used to vote on as a committee, when we would vote for who was admitted, waitlisted, or denied, we literally voted with an index card that was red, yellow, and green.
Yeah.
And with no words, we would just say, okay, take a vote. And then we vote.
Wow.
So my idea is like to have a red, yellow, and green party.
You should trademark that idea, Cynthia. Forget giving it to Martha Stewart. That is your baby and you should run with it. I love that idea. I think that's very clever and would be super catchy. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah. Okay, good.
Now, is there one secret that you wish that every family knew about the process? One little sort of secret sauce thing that people tend to miss?
Sure. The biggest secret is I'm going to just unpack it, but let me tell you what it is. It's called the school profile. So every high school should have what's called a school profile. And so what is on that school profile is what colleges use as like our Bible, like what we look at and see, okay, this is the school, this is where they're located, this is the demographics, this is how the size of the school. It tells me how many honors and APs are offered at that school, if there's a limit to how many honors and APs a student can take. It tells me where the school students are getting into college from that school. So when I look at that school profile, I can understand the context in which I'm reading the application. So give you an example. A student who goes to a high school that offers a total of 5 APs and honors classes and took all 5 of them. Yeah. Going to be as strong, if not a stronger applicant than a student who took 1 or 2 APs where there were 20 plus offered.
Okay.
I
did not know that.
Yeah. So understanding the context in which you come from most parents don't even know that that document exists. So you can just Google the name of your high school. My high school where I went is Bellflower High School. So you Google Bellflower High School plus the words school profile, and it should come up as a PDF. And if it doesn't, ask the counselor, go to the counselor office, because then now you can look at that and you can see the GPA distribution on there. And now your child knows what dream they're chasing. If the top kid is getting a 4.5 and they're trying to be the top kid, now you know. So everything about who you are and how college is going to look at you in that context is right there on that profile.
Wow. Okay. I did not know that. And I want to circle back. One thing when you were saying, and we were talking, I was so fascinated about your sort of rejection and reveal party. You talked about in the admissions process, holding up those green or yellow or red cards or whatever. And one of the surprising things I read of yours is your caution that admissions officers will spend no more than 12 minutes reading an entire college application. Like, that kind of blew me away. So tell us about that and why it's so important to know that.
Oh, gosh. Yeah, so we share that no more than between 6 and 12 minutes. And being at Vassar at a private institution, I had the luxury of being able to spend 12, maybe 14 minutes on an application.
Wow.
But some of the colleges that are receiving over 100,000 applications, they just don't have the time. So we say you've got to have an interesting, engaging, and compelling application in totality. We really focus, College Essay Bootcamp we run in the summer, so the essays are a big portion of that. But everything in the application should help your reader and connect the dots for your reader. It should be easy. I always say, there's like, if the reader is having to expend a lot of brain, calories to figure you out and connect the dots and trying to see, like, what are her, if you say you want to be a doctor ultimately, and what in your resume is evidence that shows me you've done things that are aiming towards that goal. So it should be very, very clear. I had a kid who said to me, there are 6 living African-American paleontologists, and I want to be, or there are 5, and I want to be number 6.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, let's go. So, everything in his file pointed to that. He wanted evolutionary biology. He had interned with like Dinosaur George. He'd done all these things. And so when he was when he was deferred after he applied early to Harvard, and he was deferred, and I said, Curtis, did you say explicitly in your application that what you told me? And he said, no, I didn't. And I said, go back. You got to make it so easy for the reader to walk away going, I get Curtis, I get Cindy, I know what this person is going to contribute. He was admitted to Harvard later.
Oh my gosh, congrats. That's exciting. And what great advice, right? I mean, you don't think about that, getting that volume and that small time, that you've got to make that application pop, and something about it needs to make you stand out as a person, like your humanity, something interesting and unique about you. I think that's, and then that comes back to that preparation piece too, because I'm always preaching that preparation is one of the single most important factors in negotiating best outcomes. And I assume you agree, because you've got some pretty clear systems to help navigate the process to maximize success, like easy to follow preparation modules. So dig in, what are the, like, you've got the 90-10 rule. What is that about?
The 90-10 rule is that 90% of the application happens before senior year. Okay. So really understanding that whatever is happening starting freshman to junior year, whether you're negotiating like what courses you take, like sometimes that's like the first negotiation that happens when you're sitting with your counselor and you're like advocating for yourself. Well, I want to get to honors English, right away, because the honors English will lead to AP English, or honors math will lead to AP calculus. So the negotiation process for you, advocating for yourself and who you are academically, co-curricular wise, that all starts. Because once the senior year actually hits, and it's now September, here in California, at least, students will have until November 30th to apply to all of the California public schools. But many students are applying early action or early decision on November 1st, November 15th. It comes fast. Everything that goes into that application, your GPA, it's signed, sealed, and delivered through the end of junior year. You can't change that. Your co-curriculars, whatever you did, it's done. Any experience that you're going to write about in your essay, hopefully you've taken our essay camp and you did it in the summer, but it's already happened. So all that's left to do is actually put the components together, copy and paste, and submit. Wow. So you graduate with 4 years, 8 semesters, but you're really applying to college by the end of the 6 semesters.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes total sense. And as you were saying that, it also got me thinking about, it's like anything, like any negotiation, you need to know where you want to end up. You need to know what the end goal is so you can work back. Because I remember, as you say, I can't remember what the course was now, but I remember wanting to take something. And, back then we had grade 13, they've since got rid of it. And there were all of these sort of precursors that I needed to have taken that I didn't take and I hadn't known about. And then you're kind of stuck. So that's really great advice to think with the end in mind and then work your way back so that you're starting that process right out of the gate when you hit high school. And what is I love, you have sisters, you're like me. I've got all these models and sisters for the art of feminine negotiation. I know you've got a connect the dots rule, I think you call it. What is that?
Well, I gave the Curtis example is a great example of connecting the dots. But that's really, and that's the extreme, right? And he was super special. He was like a unicorn that year. He got into places. But it can be very simple also. It can just be, in the University of California system, this is tough to do because 5 of the 9 UC schools receive over 100,000 applications. It is insane. People really have to understand that this is not about who's qualified. Yeah. Most of the pool is qualified. It's not personal, right? Yeah. Students are not rejected. Applications are rejected. Yeah. So understanding that the goal of the application is to make very clear who you are. So we use these like the core 4 essays. That you need a who am I essay, a what am I good at, what's something super cool about me, and what is my academic or my future connection. Make clear to the reader who you are and how that has manifested in the past and how it will manifest in the future. So they really just understand how you're going to contribute and how they can visualize you in their institution. You're not going to be a fit for everyone. Yeah. Think about, if you apply to Apple, Nike, Disney, Amazon, and Google, you're not going to get all those jobs because they each have different values and missions. And so it's not a one size fits all. So again, students are not rejected, applications are. So just do yourself a favor to try and maximize your chances. Yeah. And I want to really put a pin in that distinction for our listeners as well, because I think we tend to personalize everything and we're so conditioned to get our sense of value and our sense of worth externally rather than internally. So I love that distinction that this isn't a personal rejection of you. This is the application, and you're competing in a pool where almost everybody's hitting those minimum qualifications and then some. And it strikes me that advice is so great in life as well. This is brilliant for your college application process, and what a great training ground. But also, it was ironic because I just had that thought. And then you started naming Apple and Google and Nike and that, because absolutely, when you go out into the work world as well, and I'm thinking even for my law firm for years, when I'm interviewing somebody, I want to see that spark, that light, that's something that sets them apart. Everybody's coming with their law degree. Everybody's had all of those sort of standard experiences. So you want something that's going to set somebody apart and know that they're going to be a good fit. So I think that is super valuable advice for college and beyond. Now, one of the things, go ahead. Oh, no, I was just going to say, and I think you'll understand this, that the hardest part of this journey or this actual process and in the senior years, putting this all together, is that most adults, but much less teenagers, have not ever taken the time to reflect on who they are and what they value. That's something that adults do that are, trying to find their way and, really have the understanding of what it means to find true self. Yeah. We're asking that of a 17-year-old, and most have not done it. Oh. And that's the journey, right? I always say that destination is not university with a U. The destination is you, YOU. Yeah. Oh, I love it. And I'm smiling here because we started late and made up for lost time. I've got 3 kids. We had 3 in 3 years. So I know, And I'm just thinking of my kids, we've got a 26, a 25, and almost 24-year-old. And I'm still not sure they've
discovered really, really deeply, especially the boys, to be honest, but who they are. So I think that's a great observation. Now, one of the things that really caught my attention in your stuff is you advocate the 25% rule around the 3Ds. And when I read what the 3Ds were, I was like, oh my gosh, I've got to hear more about this. So share your insights on the 3Ds and what that 25% rule is.
Well, so, some of the most common essay topics include community service, athletics, and sort of life challenges. And so when it comes to life challenges, the 3Ds are death, divorce, and devastation. And I guess there's a fourth, actually getting a D on the transcript. So yeah. Students write about, death, divorce, or devastation, some big life challenges in their life. What happens is that essay begins to take on a life of its own, and you're sharing sort of all of the things that went wrong in your life without really giving the reader a chance to know how you turned it around. So if you insist and need to share that story, and certainly these topics are merit worthy, but spend no more than 25% of the essay talking about the actual devastation, the life challenge, and then move quickly to what did you learn? What did you do? How did you turn it around? And so that the college isn't thinking, sometimes I worked at an all-girls school. There were a number of things, sometimes they were going through depression or something tragic happened in their life. Well, we don't want to bring on a student that is still dealing with something that's been hard and they haven't worked through it, because that's not setting them up for success once they're here. So we really want to hear what comes after.
Oh, that's such important advice on so many levels, I think, because maybe I'm just old, but I think so I'm dating myself here, but I do find there's a bit of a generational thing where there's so much more drama around stuff, right? And they revel in the drama of it. And tied to that, it's a bit of a double whammy, because I do think the messaging out there is, oh, share your heartbreak story, share your heartbreak story. That's what's going to set you apart. So I love that you are advising and encouraging people, have that heartbreak story, but show the growth from it, hit it, and then show the positive aspect of it.
Do you mind if I share? You made me think of a really good example. And so there was a student who had lost her mother. I mean, this was tragic. As a sophomore, I think she was a sophomore. So now, only about a year and a half later, now she's writing about this in her college essay. And the whole essay was, sad, and justifiably so. Again, no judgment. Yeah. But I kept having to say, but this is about your mom, not about you. Like, you need to move. Okay. She turns it around. And I mean, after 4 or 5 drafts, it finally became the pizza box story. And basically she turns this little simple thing. She becomes the mom, right? She becomes the older sister and the mom to her younger brother, and her dad travels a lot. So it's a story about her teaching her brother how to make pizza, like frozen pizza. Yeah. And so there's so much you learn, right? You understand that she's now taking on this role. You now understand that, becomes about her. And it just made me cry every time I think about that essay.
I love that. What a great example. Thank you for sharing that. And I saw you mention a couple of times the cool factor, I think you call it. So what is the cool factor, and how does that 15 to 20 hour rule tie into it?
Ooh, so one of my favorite things to do when I meet with private clients is discover their coolness factor. Yeah. And coolness factor is, again, for students who are really serious about applying to top 100 colleges, they really do need something to stand out, like the Curtis example about the paleontologist. I want to be number 6. But the coolness factor is when you merge something you completely love doing, you would do even if you didn't get paid to do, and you merge it with something you have to do. So the example I often use is someone who loves, pets and, animal shelters, and wants to help, go work at the local shelter to help dogs find homes, but what's something they want to major in, maybe they want to be an English major, they want to be a writer. So you go and you volunteer for the shelter to write their newsletter. And then you do little mini, interviews with the dogs, right? I'm going to interview, Mr. Paddles. And Mr. Paddles comes from, and you do that. So merging something you love to do with something you have to do. So a more simple example is Sienna. I worked with Sienna. When she was a sophomore, she said she wanted to be a pediatrician. So she wanted to work with kids. So we found her a nonprofit organization that called Beads of Courage. And what she had to do, she had a sewing machine. She likes to sew as well and knit and all these things. So she was going to make some bead bags. So they're little, just simple bags that she had to sew, so that when cancer's kids would get their sort of milestones, they would get these little beads and then they would put them in the bead bags. This is a positive affirmation kind of thing. So Sienna made it her mission. We made it a goal that she would sew 100 bead bags over the course of 12 months. So about 10 a month was like sort of her goal. And so she did that. And understanding that part of this process is just becoming an engaged and interested student. Interested students become interesting applicants. Yeah. So she just did this project on her own because she was not this like the president and the editor. She was not going to ever be that kind of leader. So she needed a little coolness factor. Yeah. And she wrote that essay about, there she was on the floor cutting the material and sewing them up. And she shared that. And I can't tell you how many colleges wrote her a personal note at the bottom of her acceptance letter about, that was so great. I loved your work with Beads of Courage. So it doesn't have to be like you're curing cancer. It can be very simple. So
I think that's fantastic. That's great. And what a great messaging for our listeners out there as well. Because I think everybody always assumes, and I'm so glad you mentioned that you have to be, the editor of the review, or you have to, be the star of the whatever team. So I think it's great to show that you can be authentically yourself, find something that you are passionate about and make that your coolness factor. I think that's great. And great advice, frankly, even for younger kids, as you're saying that. I wish we should have that messaging at elementary school, that your coolness factor is whatever you're passionate about, not what everybody at the time seems to think defines it. So,
and not what your parents want you to do, right?
Yes. Oh my gosh, isn't that the truth? So much pressure now more than our generation. Like, God, I think back, my parents never knew when I had tests or exams or assignments due. It was just expected you were taking care of business. And now all of this, not only micromanaging, but totally directing the direction that your kids are going in. I think it's unfortunate. Now, I talk a lot about mindset and how sort of negotiating our mindset is our first and most important negotiation. What role does mindset, do you find, play in this process? Because it can be a pretty stressful process.
Ooh, I love this question. Again, most humans haven't, adults haven't done that kind of work, and certainly not all teams. But when I work with my private clients, I get to have more say of what they're doing. And so right now I'm working with 3 freshmen, for example. And one of the first things we do is talk about, the mindset. What is the goal? How do we backwards engineer what you're looking at? And how do you set that mindset of, there was this phrase like WWJ, like what would Jesus do? And I would say like, okay, tell me if it's Princeton, like, okay, what would WWP, like what would a Princeton student do? Like you have to always be asking yourself, again, whatever your dream school is, whether it's USC or Rice or UCLA or University of Michigan or University of Alabama, I don't care what it is. Yep. But think about that, go there, do your homework, visualize yourself there, and visualize yourself as a college student already. Yeah. You're setting yourself up for success now. It is not about so you really have to get in the mindset of like, this is happening. This is going to happen. And for students who come to me that early on, obviously, I don't want to make it a big pressure, but students who come and start to work with me that early typically are applying to, Ivy League schools. Yeah. So Jonna last year, she is at Princeton, but she'd been thinking about that since she was 8 years old. And Alexis is now at Yale. She's been dreaming about going to, Harvard or Yale since, she can remember. So you really have to put your mindset, and really, again, like my mom used to say, when you go to college. So you have to already own it.
I love that when you said that at the outset. I thought that was great. And it's like that act as if, right? I think that's such great advice in life. If you're shooting for that higher position later in life, or you want to be an entrepreneur and run your own business, act as if you're already at the pinnacle, right? And make your decisions consistent with the values that will be there. I think that's beautiful advice. And speaking of mindset, I can't believe our time has gone quick. You are delightful to chat with, and you've given us, I can't believe how much information you've packed into a short time here for us and our listeners. So great appreciation. And I normally like to end by asking, what's one of the greatest speaking of mindset, what's one of the greatest mindset shifts you've had in your life? Doesn't have to be on this issue at all, Cynthia. It could be anything, just one of those moments that changes how you look at things.
Well, actually, when we were just talking right now, when I was growing up, my mom was full of anecdotes as well, but she said two things. Dime con quién andas y te digo quién eres, which is basically kind of tell me who you are, who you hang out with, your friends. And that tells me everything I need to know about you. Yeah. And then she also said, dress for the job you want, not the job you have. So those things all kind of finally culminated and not too long ago. Understanding, when I was a dean of students at a private girls' school, I would dress in a suit. I would come, every Monday, which was dress uniform for the girls. And a lot of the girls would later, they would say, "Oh, I thought you were the principal." I'd be like, "No, I'm not the principal. One day I'm going to be. Like one day I'm going to be." And so I didn't realize that's what I was doing, right? Yeah. And the other thing is like whatever. Right now, I'm in the process of like up leveling, my business. So finding other like-minded folks that I need to, sort of up level my, the friends and the networks that I associate with. And that's going to help me get to the next level. So I say the same thing to the students, you've got to find other like-minded friends and families who have the same goals as you, and you'll get there.
Yeah. Great advice. Your mother sounds fabulous, by the way. My gosh. Oh my goodness. And I love what you're talking about, that power of proximity, I often call it, right? I mean, we need to look at our inner circle, and I'd say on multiple levels, like that for the reasons that you've suggested, and also in terms of our own mindset, because sometimes the people in our closest circle, even with the best of intentions, are people who are dragging us down, right? That crab in a bucket, they want to keep us safe maybe. And it's so important to have a circle of proximity in your inner circle of people who inspire you to step out, to get outside your comfort zone, to take those chances and think bigger. I think it's a game changer in life generally, and negotiating our best life, if you will. So
yes.
Yeah. So Cynthia, thank you so much for being with us. I think this has been a fabulous conversation. Really appreciate the insights you've shared.
Thank you for having me. It has been a joy and very I hope that it helps all the parents who are listening and anybody who's wants to have good life lessons.
Oh, you gave such incredible gold nuggets all the way through for people. So go for any of you who are looking you're at that college application stage, or even better yet, as Cynthia said, earlier in the process, I invite you re-listen to this podcast, share this podcast with other people and take notes, get a step-by-step, or even better, reach out to Dr. Cynthia Colón so that you can get your personalized coaching about how to maximize your chances in that process. Now, I know on social, you've got a lot, like your handle is Dr. Cynthia, at Dr. Cynthia Colón. Is that the best place for people to get a hold of you, Cynthia? Or
everything is Dr. Cynthia Colón. The last name is C-O-L like Larry, O-N like Nancy. That's my website. It's my LinkedIn, Instagram, and Facebook. So you can find me anywhere.
Keeps it nice and easy, and we'll make sure to put that in the show notes for everybody. And I am sure you all got loads of value from this episode. As I say, go back and re-listen. There are all kinds of nuggets there, things I wish I had when I was applying back in the day, things I wish I'd known when my kids were all applying as well. Make sure to subscribe to the podcast if you haven't done that yet, and leave a review. Hopefully you'll find that it deserves a 5-star review, and share this episode with anybody that you think can get value from the message. And as always, before we sign off today, just want to share a few ways, if you are looking to up-level your negotiation skills, how we could work together. If you're wanting to be able to better leverage your innate power to get more of what you want and deserve, I've got everything from online to group to my signature mastermind programs available. So check that out at artoffemininenegotiation.com if that sounds interesting. And if you haven't yet, make sure to grab my book, The Art of Feminine Negotiation. And that is a wrap for this episode. So until next time, as always, go forth and negotiate your best life on your terms so you can stop missing out and start getting more of what you want and deserve from the boardroom to the bedroom. Until next time, take care.